The desert doesn't forgive mistakes, but Malcolm Rourke was about to make the biggest one of his life, and it would save them both. When a starving woman pressed a revolver to his chest and robbed him blind, he didn't fight back. When she collapsed from hunger, he didn't ride away. Instead, he said 5 words that changed everything. "You forgot my last name." This is the story of a desperate mother, 2 stolen children, and the cowboy who broke every rule to make them whole again. Drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The sun was dying over Arizona territory, bleeding crimson across the canyon walls like the land itself had been split open. Malcolm Rourke had seen 1,000 sunsets just like it, each one beautiful, each one indifferent, each one marking another day survived in a place that killed the careless and the kind with equal efficiency. He was neither. Malcolm was methodical. 32 years old, weathered down to sinew and instinct, he'd learned to read the desert the way other men read newspapers. The shift in the wind, the nervous dance of his horse's ears, the way silence could thicken in the air right before something went wrong. And something was definitely wrong. His wagon groaned beneath 2 weeks' worth of dry goods, tools, and trade supplies bound for the mining camps north of Prescott. The wheels kicked up dust that hung in the still air like smoke. His team, a matched pair of sorrels named Rust and Revenue, had been twitchy for the last mile, heads tossing, nostrils flared. Malcolm's hand drifted to the rifle wedged beside the driver's bench, fingers resting light on the stock. His eyes swept the landscape. Saguaro standing like sentries, Ocotillo reaching skeletal fingers toward the sky, and 1,000 places for a man, or something worse, to hide. The road, if you could call it that, cut through a narrow draw where the cliff face rose steep on the left, and a scatter of boulders and scrub oak crowded the right. Perfect place for an ambush. Malcolm had avoided it twice before, taking the long route around, but this time he was late, and the light was fading, and he'd gambled on speed over caution. Mistake. She stepped out from behind a boulder like a ghost taking shape, thin, dust-covered, swaying slightly on her feet. For a half-second, Malcolm thought she might be a mirage, one of those cruel tricks the desert played on men too long in the sun. Then he saw the revolver. It was an old Navy Colt, too big for her hand, the barrel shaking just enough to make it more dangerous, not less. A scared person with a gun was deadlier than a calm one. Scared people pulled triggers. "Stop right there," her voice cracked on the words, dry as the wind. Malcolm reined in slowly, hands visible, movements deliberate. Rust and Revenue snorted and stamped, but they held. Good horses knew when to be still. "Easy," Malcolm said, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the horses, the woman, or himself. She took 3 steps closer, and Malcolm got his first real look at her. Mid-20s maybe, though the desert aged people fast. Her dress had once been blue calico, now faded to the color of dust and held together with hope and stitching. Her dark hair hung in a matted braid over one shoulder, but it was her eyes that caught him, dark, hollow, burning with something that went deeper than hunger. Desperation. He'd seen it before. Hell, he'd worn it himself once, a long time ago. "Step down from that wagon." The gun barrel jerked toward the ground. "Slow." Malcolm raised his hands higher and climbed down, boots hitting the hard pan with a soft thud. He kept his movements easy, unthreatening. The rifle stayed where it was. If she wanted him dead, he already would be. "Smart man," she said, but there was no satisfaction in it, just exhaustion. "Been called worse," Malcolm said evenly. She gestured with the Colt. "Back up, 10 steps." He did. She moved toward the wagon, never taking her eyes off him, never lowering the gun. Her free hand grabbed the tailgate for support, and Malcolm saw how badly she was shaking. Not just her hands, all of her. "Food," she said. "You got food in here?" Back left corner, canvas sack, salt pork, hardtack, some dried apples. She hauled herself up into the wagon bed with effort that shouldn't have been necessary for someone her size. Malcolm heard her rummaging, the desperate sound of someone who hadn't eaten in days, maybe longer. When she reappeared, she had the sack clutched to her chest like a child holding a doll. Her eyes were wet. "Money," she said, voice rougher now. "Where is it?" Tin box under the driver's seat. $43 and some change. Get it. Malcolm hesitated. I moved toward the wagon. You're going to get nervous. Nervous people make mistakes. I said, get it. He moved slowly, circling wide, reaching under the bench without taking his eyes off her. His fingers found the tin box, pulled it free. He held it up so she could see it, then set it on the ground halfway between them. Anything else? He asked. She stared at the box like it might bite her. Tools. I need... Her voice broke. She swallowed hard, tried again. I need tools. A hammer. Nails if you got them. Wire. Tool chest is bolted to the right side of the wagon bed. She disappeared again, and Malcolm heard the screech of the chest opening, the clatter of metal on wood. When she climbed down, she could barely hold everything: the food sack, a hammer, a coil of wire, a small cloth bag of nails. The gun was tucked into the rope she was using as a belt, and Malcolm saw his chance. He didn't take it. Instead, he watched her struggle to gather her stolen goods, watched her chest heave with the effort of simply standing, watched the way she kept glancing over her shoulder at the empty desert like something was chasing her. Maybe something was. That everything? Malcolm asked. She looked up at him, surprised by the question, or maybe by the tone. No anger in it, no judgment, just a question. She wavered on her feet, caught herself. Yeah, that's everything. Malcolm nodded slowly. Then he said the words that would change both their lives. You forgot one thing. Her hand went to the gun. What? My last name. She froze, stared at him like he'd spoken in a language she didn't understand. What the hell does that mean? Rourke, Malcolm said quietly. Malcolm Rourke. You're going to want to remember that. Why? Her voice was sharp with suspicion. Because when you come back, when you're ready to stop running, you're going to need to know who to look for. The words hit her like a physical blow. She actually took a step back, the supplies nearly spilling from her arms. I ain't coming back. I ain't... Her voice cracked again. I ain't never seeing you again. Maybe, Malcolm agreed. But if you do, the name's Rourke. Malcolm Rourke. Folks around Sanada know me. Folks around Prescott. You ask for me, someone will know where to find me. Why would I... She stopped, swayed, put one hand to her head. Malcolm saw it happening before she did, the way her knees buckled, the way the color drained from her already pale face. He was moving before she started to fall. He caught her before she hit the ground, supplies scattering across the dirt. The gun slipped from her belt and Malcolm kicked it away, out of reach, out of instinct. But she wasn't fighting. She was barely conscious, her body light as a child's in his arms. Jesus, he muttered. When's the last time you ate? 2 days? 3? Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Let me go. In a minute. First you're going to drink some water and not die on me. He carried her to the wagon and set her down in the shade of the tailgate, her back against the wheel. She tried to push him away, but there was no strength in it. Malcolm grabbed his canteen and uncorked it, held it to her lips. Drink, slow. She drank. Too fast at first, choking, water spilling down her chin. Malcolm pulled it back. I said slow. You'll make yourself sick. I'm already sick. But she drank again, slower this time, and some color started to return to her face. Why are you helping me? I just robbed you. Yeah, you did. Malcolm sat back on his heels, studying her. You want to tell me why? That's my business. Fair enough. He glanced at the scattered supplies, the salt pork, the tools, the pitiful handful of coins from the tin box. But I'm guessing you didn't do it for fun. She laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. No, not for fun. Malcolm let the silence stretch. He'd learned a long time ago that silence could pull truth out of people better than questions ever could. People didn't like empty air. They filled it. She filled it. I had a daughter and a son, she said finally, voice flat. Mara and Finn, 7 and 5 years old. Had. Malcolm felt something cold settle in his chest. Had? Not dead. She said it quickly, desperately, like she needed him to know. Not dead. Taken. Sold. The cold spread. Sold. I was working for a woman in Tucson, Mrs. Harriet Bledstone, boarding house. She said she'd watch them while I worked, keep them fed and safe. Her hands clenched into fists. I trusted her. I thought, she seemed kind. She talked about her own children, how they'd grown up and moved away. I thought my babies would be safe. Malcolm already knew where this was going. He'd heard stories like it before. Hell, the whole West was full of them. She sold them, he said, to a man passing through. A rancher, she said, needed help on his place. She told me they'd gone of their own accord, run off. But the woman who cleaned rooms heard them crying, heard them calling for me. Her voice broke. They called for me and I wasn't there. Malcolm's jaw tightened. When? 2 months ago. I've been looking ever since, following every rumor, every story about a man traveling with children. I ran out of money 3 weeks back. Ran out of food 6 days ago. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much, lost too much. I didn't want to rob you. I swear I didn't. But I can't buy information if I'm dead, and I can't find my children if I starve first. Malcolm stood slowly, walked over to where the salt pork had fallen, picked it up, brushed the dust off, brought it back to her. Eat, he said. She stared at the food like it was a trap. What? Eat. You're no good to anyone if you pass out again. I can't. I already took. I'm giving it to you. Now eat before I change my mind. Her hand shook as she took the salt pork, tore into it with teeth that were too sharp, too desperate. She ate like an animal, like something that had forgotten it was human. Malcolm watched and felt something old and angry stir in his chest. Children. They'd sold her children. When she'd eaten enough to take the edge off, Malcolm handed her the canteen again. This time she drank slow, controlled. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated, then, Lena. Lena Calder. Lena Calder, Malcolm repeated, committing it to memory the way he'd committed 100 other names, 100 other faces. You got any idea where they took your kids? North. That's all I know. Someone said they saw a man matching the description heading north out of Tucson with 2 children, dark-haired boy and girl, about the right ages. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Could be them. Could be someone else's tragedy. Could be, Malcolm agreed. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he made a decision that went against every rule of survival he'd ever learned. I'm headed north, running supplies to the mining camps around Prescott, then up toward Flagstaff. You want to ride along, you can. Lena's head snapped up. What? You heard me. I could use help with the team, someone to watch the back trail, and if we're both heading north anyway, might as well save your feet. Why would you do that? I robbed you. Yeah, Malcolm said. You did. But you also could have shot me and didn't. And I've done things I ain't proud of when I was desperate. He met her eyes. Everyone deserves a second chance, even people who pull guns on strangers. She was quiet for a long time, searching his face for the trap, the lie, the thing he wanted from her. Malcolm let her look. He had nothing to hide. Finally, she said, I don't have anything to pay you with. Didn't ask you to pay. Men always want something. Yeah, well, I'm not most men. Malcolm stood, offered her his hand. What do you say, Lena Calder? You want to keep walking until your feet bleed, or you want to ride north and see if we can find your kids? She looked at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached up and took it. Her grip was weak, but it was there. Malcolm pulled her to her feet. There's blankets in the back, he said, and more food. You eat what you need, drink what you want, and get some rest. We'll start fresh in the morning. Just like that? Her voice was thick with suspicion and something else, something that might have been hope. Just like that. Malcolm gathered up the scattered supplies, loaded them back into the wagon, the tin box with his money, the tools, the food, all of it. He didn't count what was missing, didn't matter. Lena watched him work, still wary, still waiting for the other boot to drop. It didn't. When everything was secured, Malcolm climbed up onto the driver's bench and looked back at her. You coming or not? She climbed up beside him, moving like every bone hurt. Probably did. Malcolm didn't comment on it. He clicked his tongue, and Rust and Revenue leaned into their harnesses, the wagon rolling forward with a creak of wood and leather. The sun had finally died, leaving the sky purple and gold, and the first stars were starting to appear. They rode in silence for the better part of an hour. Malcolm kept his eyes on the road, but his awareness was all on the woman beside him, the way she sat rigid, ready to bolt, the way her hand kept drifting to where the gun had been. He'd kicked it into the scrub. She hadn't asked for it back. Smart woman. Finally, as the moon rose fat and silver over the eastern hills, Lena spoke. "Why'd you say that? About your last name?" Malcolm was quiet for a moment, then, "My father was a drunk and a bastard, and my mother died when I was 12. I spent the next 5 years doing whatever I had to do to survive. Some of it legal, most of it not." He glanced at her. "But when I was 17, a man named Abraham Talbot gave me a job hauling freight, paid me fair, treated me decent, never asked about my past. When I asked him why, you know what he said?" Lena shook her head. "He said, because I remember what it's like to be hungry and desperate and one bad decision away from dead. And because somebody did the same for me once." Malcolm looked back at the road. He said, "Someday, when you got the means, you pass it on. You remember your last name means something, and you make sure other people remember it for the right reasons. So Rourke means something." "It does to me." Malcolm's voice was quiet but firm. "It means I don't leave people to die in the desert. It means I help when I can, and it means my word is worth a damn, which is more than most people can say out here." Lena was quiet for a long time, then so soft he almost didn't hear it. "Thank you." Malcolm just nodded. They made camp an hour later in a dry wash sheltered by cottonwoods. Malcolm unhitched the team, rubbed them down, let them drink from the water he poured into a folding canvas bucket. Lena watched, then started gathering deadwood for a fire without being asked. She was quick, efficient, moving through the tasks like someone who'd done them 1,000 times. Malcolm started to see past the desperation, the dirt, the exhaustion. Started to see the woman she'd been before her children were stolen. Strong, capable, fierce, good. He built the fire while she laid out the bedrolls, one for each of them, a respectful distance apart. Malcolm noticed and appreciated it. Trust was earned, not assumed. They ate in silence. More salt pork, hardtack softened in coffee, some of the dried apples. Lena ate slowly this time, like she was remembering how, like she was human again instead of just a thing that survived. When the food was gone and the fire had burned down to coals, Malcolm leaned back against his saddle and looked up at the stars. They were thick as spilled salt across the black sky, so many it seemed impossible they could all fit up there. "Can I ask you something?" Lena's voice came from across the fire. "Go ahead. You really think we can find them? My kids?" Malcolm considered lying, considered telling her what she wanted to hear, but Abraham Talbot had taught him better than that. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Territory's big. People disappear into it all the time. But I know this, you got a better chance with help than without it. And I know you're not going to quit looking, so you might as well have someone watching your back while you do." "That's not much of a yes. It's the truth. Truth's all I got to give you." Lena pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "The truth is I'm terrified. Terrified they're hurt. Terrified they think I abandoned them. Terrified I'll never—" Her voice broke. She took a breath, steadied it. "Terrified I'll never see them again." "Yeah," Malcolm said. "Fear's a reasonable response to what you're dealing with. You ever been that scared?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Once. Long time ago. I watched a man beat his horse to death because it spooked and threw him. Beat it until it couldn't stand, then beat it some more. I was 14, too small to stop him, too scared to try. I just stood there and watched that animal die." Lena looked at him across the fire. "I swore I'd never be that scared again," Malcolm continued. "Swore I'd never be too small or too weak to stop something wrong from happening. So I got bigger, got stronger, got meaner when I needed to be." He met her eyes. "Point is, being scared don't make you weak. What you do with the fear, that's what matters. And what am I supposed to do with it? Use it. Let it push you forward instead of pulling you down. Let it remind you what you're fighting for." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up into the dark. "Your kids need you, Lena. They need you strong and alive and coming for them. So you take that fear and you turn it into something useful. You turn it into fuel. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "You're a strange man, Malcolm Rourke." "Yeah," he agreed. "I've been told." "Strange in a good way." He smiled, just a little. "I'll take it." Lena lay down then, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. The deep, exhausted sleep of someone who'd been running on nothing for too long. Malcolm stayed awake, tending the fire, listening to the night sounds. Coyotes yipping in the distance, the soft stamp of the horses, the wind moving through the cottonwood leaves like whispered secrets. He thought about what he'd just promised, thought about what it might cost him, time, money, maybe his life if they ran into the wrong people. The smart thing would be to drop her at the next town, give her a few dollars, and keep moving. But Malcolm had learned a long time ago that the smart thing and the right thing weren't always the same, and he'd also learned that some debts got paid forward, not back. Abraham Talbot had saved him once, given him a chance when he had no right to expect one. Malcolm had spent 15 years trying to be worthy of that gift, trying to live up to the name he'd built for himself. Rourke. A name that meant something. Maybe it was time to prove it meant something to someone else too. He looked over at Lena's sleeping form, small and fragile looking under the blanket. But he'd seen the steel in her eyes, the absolute refusal to quit. She'd rob a stranger at gunpoint before she'd give up on her children. That kind of love didn't break easy. Malcolm added another piece of wood to the fire and settled in for a long night. Tomorrow they'd start north. Tomorrow they'd start asking questions, following rumors, shaking trees to see what fell out. Tomorrow, they'd start hunting for 2 stolen children in a territory that ate people alive. But tonight, for the first time in 2 months, Lena Calder would sleep without fear. And that, Malcolm thought, was worth something all by itself. The fire crackled. The stars wheeled overhead. And somewhere in the darkness, a future neither of them could imagine was already beginning to take shape, built on mercy and desperation, on one man's quiet kindness and one woman's unbreakable will. They didn't know it yet, but the desert knew. The desert always knew. The dawn came soft and pink, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold. Malcolm woke to the sound of movement, quiet, careful, the kind of sound someone made when they were trying not to wake another person. He kept his eyes closed, his breathing steady, his hand near the knife he kept tucked in his boot. Old habits. Through slitted eyelids, he watched Lena crouch by the remnants of the fire, coaxing it back to life with small sticks and dry grass. Her movements were practiced, efficient. She'd done this before, probably 1,000 times. Probably taught her children how to do it too. The thought of those children, Mara and Finn, 7 and 5, stolen and sold like livestock, made something dark and angry coil in Malcolm's chest. He'd seen a lot of cruelty in his 32 years, but there was something particularly vile about people who traded in children. When the fire was crackling and Lena had coffee brewing in the battered pot Malcolm kept strapped to his saddle, he sat up and stretched, making enough noise to announce he was awake. "Morning," he said. Lena startled slightly, then relaxed when she saw him. "Morning. Hope you don't mind. I found the coffee in your supplies." "Mind? Woman builds me a fire and makes coffee. I'm not fool enough to complain." Malcolm stood, worked the kinks out of his back. Sleeping on the ground got harder every year. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks." She poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handed him one. "Thank you, for last night, for all of it." Malcolm took the coffee, wrapped his hands around the warmth. The desert morning was cold, the heat of the day still hours away. "You already thanked me. Don't need to keep doing it. Still feels like I should." "Then put that energy into helping me get this camp broken down. We got miles to cover." They worked together in comfortable silence, falling into a rhythm that felt strangely natural. Lena rolled the bedrolls while Malcolm saw to the horses. She packed the cooking gear while he hitched the team. Within an hour, they were rolling north again, the sun climbing higher, burning off the morning chill. The road, such as it was, followed a dry creek bed through country that got progressively rougher. Red rock gave way to scattered pine, and the air smelled of dust and sage and something green and alive that Malcolm couldn't quite name. Lena sat beside him on the bench, her eyes scanning the landscape with the intensity of someone who'd been looking for something so long they couldn't stop even if they wanted to. "Tell me about them," Malcolm said after a while. "Your kids." Lena glanced at him, surprised. "Why?" "Because if we're going to find them, I need to know who we're looking for, and because talking might help pass the time." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers worrying at a loose thread on her dress. Then she started talking, and once she started, the words came like water from a broken dam. "Mara's the oldest, 7 years old, born in the spring during a thunderstorm so fierce I thought the world was ending. She came into the world screaming, and she hasn't stopped fighting since." Lena's voice softened with memory. "She's got dark hair like mine, dark eyes, and a stubborn streak a mile wide. Smart, too. Too smart for her own good sometimes. She taught herself to read from an old Bible I found at a church sale. 7 years old and reading already, that's something. She read it to Finn every night before bed, made up voices for all the characters, acted out the stories, made him laugh even when we had nothing to eat but cornmeal mush." Lena's hands clenched in her lap. "Finn's the gentle one, 5 years old, blonde hair from his father, blue eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. He loved animals, couldn't walk past a dog or a cat or even a lizard without stopping to talk to it." Malcolm heard the past tense, heard the way she was talking about her children like they were gone, and he understood it was the only way she could bear to speak of them at all. "He sounds like a good boy." "He is. They both are." Lena's voice cracked. "They're good children, and they didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve any of it." "No," Malcolm agreed quietly. "They didn't." They rode in silence for a while. The only sounds, the creak of the wagon, the steady clop of hooves, and the wind moving through the pines. Malcolm was thinking about the best way to start asking questions when they reached the next town when Lena spoke again. "What about you? You got family." "Not anymore. Parents are dead. No siblings. No wife." He glanced at her. "Just me and the road." "That's lonely." "Sometimes. But it's also simple. No one depending on me, no one I can disappoint." "Sounds like someone hurt you once." Malcolm's jaw tightened slightly. "Sounds like you're perceptive." "What happened?" He was quiet for long enough that Lena probably thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "I was engaged once, girl named Sarah. Pretty, smart, came from a good family. We were going to get married, buy a little farm, raise horses." He paused. "Then she met a banker who could give her a big house in town and a life that didn't involve dirt under her fingernails. Can't say I blame her. She made the smart choice. But it hurt anyway. Yeah, it hurt anyway." Malcolm shook his head. "That was 10 years ago. I've had time to make peace with it." "Have you?" "Mostly." He looked at her. "You ask a lot of questions for someone who tried to rob me yesterday." "You help a lot for someone who got robbed." Malcolm smiled despite himself. "Guess we're both a little strange that way." "Guess so." They reached the town of Cedar Springs around midday, a collection of weathered buildings clinging to existence in a landscape that seemed determined to scour them away. Malcolm pulled the wagon up in front of the general store, set the brake, and climbed down. "Wait here," he said to Lena. "I need to check on a delivery, then we can ask around about your kids." But Lena was already climbing down after him. "I'm not sitting in a wagon while you do the work." "Lena, I've been looking for 2 months, Malcolm. I'm not sitting anywhere." He saw the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, and knew there was no point in arguing. "Fine. But let me do the talking first. People get nervous when strangers start asking questions about children." They went into the store together, and Malcolm was immediately struck by how different Lena looked in the light of day, cleaned up and fed and rested. She still wore the same worn dress, still had the same exhaustion in her eyes, but there was something else there now too. Hope. Dangerous thing, hope. It could keep you alive or get you killed depending on how you used it. The store owner, a barrel-chested man named Dutch Henderson, greeted Malcolm with the easy familiarity of someone who'd done business with him before. "Rourke, didn't expect you for another week. Made good time," Malcolm gestured to Lena. "This is Mrs. Calder. She's helping me with the route." Dutch nodded at Lena, polite but curious. Small towns noticed everything, and a woman traveling with a man she wasn't married to was definitely something. Malcolm delivered the supplies Dutch had ordered, nails, lamp oil, a case of patent medicine, and collected his payment. Then, as casually as he could manage, Dutch, you hear anything about a man passing through with 2 children, boy and a girl, young, might have been a month or so ago? Dutch frowned, thinking, can't say I have. What's this about? Before Malcolm could answer, Lena stepped forward. They're my children. They were taken from me. Sold. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I'm trying to find them. Dutch's expression shifted from curiosity to something harder. Sold? You mean... I mean exactly what I said. A woman I trusted sold my babies to a stranger, and I'm trying to get them back. Malcolm watched Dutch carefully. The man's face was weathered and hard, but there was something decent in his eyes, something that understood a mother's pain. I haven't seen anything like that, Dutch said slowly. But there's a ranch about 20 miles north of here. The Smoking Jay man who owns it, Josiah Pritchard, he's known to employ children as workers. Calls them apprentices, but everyone knows what it really is. Malcolm felt Lena go rigid beside him. He buys children? Can't prove it, but yeah. I'd say that's exactly what he does. Dutch's voice was grim. Law won't touch him, though. He's careful, keeps everything looking legal on paper, says he's giving orphans a home and teaching them a trade. But they're not orphans, Lena said, her voice breaking. No, ma'am. I don't expect they are. Malcolm put a hand on Lena's arm, felt her trembling. This ranch, how do we find it? Dutch gave them directions. Follow the creek north. Look for a stand of cottonwoods. Turn east at the broken windmill. But Rourke, be careful. Pritchard's got men working for him. Hard men. They don't take kindly to questions. Noted. Malcolm tipped his hat. Appreciate the information, Dutch. Outside, Lena was already moving toward the wagon, her whole body vibrating with urgency. Malcolm caught up to her, grabbed her arm gently but firmly. Slow down. My children could be there. And charging in half-cocked is going to get us both killed and leave them still trapped. Malcolm kept his voice low, his grip steady. We do this smart, Lena. We scout it out first, figure out what we're dealing with, then we make a plan. I can't wait anymore. I can't... Yes, you can. You've waited 2 months. You can wait a few more hours to do this right. He turned her to face him, made her meet his eyes. I know you're scared. I know you want to run to them right now. But if they're there, if this is the place, then we only get one chance to get them out. We can't waste it. Lena's eyes were wet, but she nodded. Okay, we do it smart. Good. Malcolm released her arm. Now get in the wagon. We've got 20 miles to cover and a lot of thinking to do. They left Cedar Springs behind and followed Dutch's directions north, the wagon rolling through country that got progressively wilder. The road narrowed to barely a track, winding through pine forest and rocky outcroppings. Malcolm kept the team at a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow, conserving their energy. Beside him, Lena was coiled tight as a spring, her eyes fixed on the horizon like she could will her children into view. Malcolm understood the feeling. He'd felt it himself once, that desperate need to act, to do something, anything, even if it was the wrong thing. Tell me what you're thinking, he said after a while. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do to the woman who sold them, to Mrs. Bledstone. Lena's voice was flat, cold. I'm thinking about all the ways I could hurt her. That's natural. Is it? Yeah. When someone takes something precious from you, wanting them to suffer is about as natural as breathing. Malcolm kept his eyes on the road. Question is, what are you going to do with that wanting? What do you mean? I mean, revenge feels good in the moment, but it doesn't bring back what you lost. It doesn't heal anything. It just makes you into something you weren't before. He glanced at her. Your kids need a mother, not a killer. You remember that when we find them. Lena was quiet for a long time, then, you're right. I hate that you're right, but you are. I usually am. It's a burden. Despite everything, she almost smiled. You're also full of yourself. That too. They found the cottonwood stand just before sunset, and Malcolm pulled the wagon off the road into a sheltered spot where they couldn't be seen from the main track. He unhitched the team, rubbed them down, let them graze on the sparse grass growing near the creek. Lena was pacing, her energy too big for her body, looking like she might fly apart at any moment. "We should go now," she said, "before dark." "We go now. They'll see us coming from a mile away. We wait until full dark, scout on foot, see what we're dealing with. I can't just sit here." "Then help me set up camp, help me check the supplies. Help me do anything that isn't charging blindly toward a ranch full of armed men." Malcolm's voice was patient but firm. "Lena, I know this is hard, but hard doesn't mean impossible, and impossible is what it becomes if we get ourselves killed." She stopped pacing, wrapped her arms around herself. "What if they're not there? What if Dutch was wrong? Then we keep looking, but we have to check. And if they are there, then we figure out how to get them out without anyone getting hurt, especially not two children who've been through enough already." Lena nodded slowly, some of the manic energy draining out of her. "I'm sorry, every minute feels like a year. Every hour they're gone feels like I'm failing them." Malcolm walked over to her, put his hands on her shoulders. "You're not failing them. You're here. You're fighting. You didn't give up even when you had nothing left. That's not failure, Lena. That's love." Her eyes filled with tears. "What if I can't get them back? What if—" "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now we focus on what we can control. And what we can control is how prepared we are when we go in there." He squeezed her shoulders gently, then let go. "Trust me? I don't know why, but yeah, I trust you." "Good. Then trust me when I say we're going to do everything we can to bring your children home." They made camp as the sun died behind the western peaks, turning the sky the color of blood and fire. Malcolm built a small fire, just enough to heat coffee and warm some beans, then let it burn down to coals. No point in advertising their presence. When full dark had fallen and the stars were thick overhead, Malcolm stood and checked his gun belt, made sure his knife was secure, grabbed his rifle from the wagon. "Stay here," he said to Lena. "Like hell." "Lena, they're my children, Malcolm. I'm going." He looked at her, saw the absolute determination in her eyes, and knew arguing was pointless. "Fine, but you do exactly what I say, when I say it. No arguments, no hesitation. Understood?" "Understood." They moved through the darkness like shadows, following the creek until they saw lights in the distance. The Smoking Jay Ranch was bigger than Malcolm had expected. A main house, several outbuildings, corrals full of horses, and what looked like a bunkhouse for workers. Malcolm pulled Lena down behind a rocky outcropping about 100 yards from the nearest building and studied the layout. 3 men visible, all armed, all moving with the casual alertness of people who'd done guard duty before. "See anything?" Lena whispered. 3 guards that I can see. Probably more inside." Malcolm pointed to a small building set apart from the others. "That one. See how it's got a heavy door, bars on the window?" Lena's breath caught. I think that's where you keep things you don't want running away." They watched for another 30 minutes, Malcolm memorizing patrol patterns, counting minutes between guard rotations. He was about to suggest they head back and come up with a real plan when the door to the small building opened and a man came out carrying a bucket. In the light spilling from inside, Malcolm saw them. Children. At least 6 of them, maybe more, all huddled together on straw mattresses. Most were asleep, but 2 were awake, a dark-haired girl and a blonde boy, sitting close together near the back wall. Beside him, Lena made a sound like a wounded animal. Malcolm's hand clamped over her mouth before she could cry out. "Quiet," he breathed in her ear. "I know, I see them, but you make a sound and we lose any chance of getting them out." She nodded against his hand, her whole body shaking. Malcolm slowly removed his hand and watched her struggle to get herself under control. Watched her be a mother who had to choose between running to her children and doing what was smart. It was one of the hardest things he'd ever witnessed. The man with the bucket went back inside, closed the door, locked it from the outside. Malcolm heard the heavy thunk of a bar dropping into place. "We can't leave them there," Lena whispered, her voice raw. "Malcolm, we can't. We're not leaving them. But we're also not getting them out tonight. Look at that setup. 1 door, 1 window, both secured, guards rotating every 15 minutes. We go in now, we start a fight, and kids get caught in the crossfire. So what do? We go back, we make a plan, and tomorrow we come back and get them out the right way. Malcolm looked at her. Can you do that? Can you walk away from them tonight knowing we'll come back tomorrow? Lena looked at the building where her children slept, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked at Malcolm. Tell me you promise we'll get them back. I promise we'll do everything we can. That's all I can give you, Lena, but I swear to you, I will not leave those children in that place. She took a shuddering breath, then nodded. Okay, tomorrow. They crept back through the darkness to their camp, and Lena immediately collapsed by the dead fire, her body racked with silent sobs. Malcolm let her cry, understanding she needed to get it out, needed to fall apart now so she could be strong tomorrow. When the worst of it had passed, he sat down beside her and handed her a canteen. They looked okay, he said quietly. Thin, probably scared, but they were moving around. That's good. That was them, Malcolm. That was Mara and Finn. I know it was. I believe you. And he did. He'd seen the way she'd reacted, the absolute certainty in her body language. We'll get them out. How? You saw that place. It's a fortress. It's a ranch with some armed guards. I've dealt with worse. Malcolm was already thinking through options, strategies, things that could work and things that would get them killed. The key is creating a distraction, something big enough to pull the guards away from that building. Like what? Like a fire, or a stampede, or both. Malcolm looked at her. But first we need to know more. How many men total? What their routine is, where Pritchard keeps himself during the day. That could take days. It'll take one day. Tomorrow I go into town, I ask around, I find out what I need to know. Then tomorrow night we go get your kids. Lena was quiet, processing. Then, why are you doing this? Really, you could have left me in the desert, could have dropped me in Cedar Springs, could have told me you'd done enough. Why are you still here? Malcolm thought about it, about all the reasons and the one reason that mattered most. Because a long time ago, someone helped me when they didn't have to. And because those kids in that building deserve better than being someone's property. He met her eyes. And because you're a good mother who's fighting for her children, and I'll be damned if I let that fight be for nothing. Malcolm Rourke, Lena said softly, you're a better man than you give yourself credit for. We'll see. Ask me again when we've got your kids safe. They settled in for the night, Lena exhausted from emotion, Malcolm's mind racing with plans and contingencies. He'd meant what he said. He would get those children out. He'd done harder things with less reason. But as he lay there staring at the stars, listening to Lena's breathing even out into sleep, Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. That what had started as a simple act of mercy had become something more. Something that mattered in a way he couldn't quite define. He'd spent 10 years keeping people at a distance, keeping himself simple and uncomplicated. And in one day, Lena Calder and her stolen children had blown that distance to pieces. The desert wind whispered through the pines, carrying secrets and promises. And Malcolm closed his eyes and tried to rest. Tomorrow would require every ounce of skill and nerve he had. Tomorrow, they'd walk into a viper's nest and try to steal back what never should have been taken in the first place. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, for just a few hours, they could rest in the knowledge that hope, dangerous, fragile, essential hope, was still alive. And sometimes, Malcolm thought as sleep finally claimed him, that was enough to build a miracle on. Malcolm was already awake when the first gray light touched the eastern sky. He hadn't slept much, his mind too busy working through scenarios, calculating risks, preparing for everything that could go wrong. And plenty could go wrong. He sat up quietly, not wanting to wake Lena, and began checking his weapons. The rifle was clean, well-oiled, loaded. The pistol at his hip likewise. The knife in his boot had an edge sharp enough to shave with. Tools of violence that he'd hoped he wouldn't need, but knew he probably would. "You're up early." Lena's voice came from her bedroll, thick with exhaustion that sleep hadn't quite erased. "Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about." Malcolm glanced over at her. In the dim light, she looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. "You should rest more. Today's going to be long." "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see them in that building." She sat up, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders against the morning chill. I see Mara trying to be brave for Finn. See Finn crying for me. I can't rest knowing they're so close. I know. Malcolm set his rifle aside, poured water from the canteen into the coffee pot. But you're no good to them exhausted. Neither am I, so we take care of ourselves first, then we take care of them. Lena nodded slowly, accepting the logic even if she hated it. What's the plan? I ride into Cedar Springs, talk to Dutch again, see what else I can learn about Pritchard and his operation. You stay here with the wagon, out of sight, and rest. When I get back, we finalize the plan and move tonight. I don't like staying behind. I know, but a strange woman asking questions about Pritchard's ranch will raise flags. A man doing business with Dutch, having a casual conversation, won't. Malcolm struck a match, lit the kindling he'd prepared under the coffee pot. Trust me on this. I seem to be doing a lot of that lately, trusting you. Is it working out so far? Lena was quiet for a moment, then smiled faintly. Yeah, it is. They shared coffee and the last of the hardtack as the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning cold. Malcolm saddled Rust, leaving revenue with the wagon for Lena. Before he mounted up, he handed her the pistol from his saddlebag. You know how to use this? Point and pull the trigger, right? More or less. Malcolm showed her how to check if it was loaded, how to cock the hammer, how to aim center mass because accuracy under stress was harder than people thought. You see anyone coming toward this camp who isn't me? You fire a warning shot. They keep coming, you aim for real. Understood? Lena took the gun, felt its weight in her hand. I won't hesitate. Good. But hopefully you won't need it. Malcolm swung up into the saddle. I'll be back by early afternoon. You need anything before I go? Just a promise that this is really going to work. Don't make promises I can't keep, Lena. But I'll tell you this. I've never quit a thing in my life, and I'm not starting now. He rode out before she could respond, following the creek back the way they'd come, Rust moving at an easy lope that ate up the miles. Malcolm's mind was already in Cedar Springs, already planning conversations, already thinking 3 moves ahead. The town was busier than it had been the day before. A freight wagon had come in from Prescott, and men were unloading supplies while others gathered outside the saloon, talking and smoking and doing the kind of nothing that men did when they had time to waste. Malcolm tied Rust outside the general store and went in. Dutch was behind the counter, sorting through a shipment of dry goods. Rourke, back already? Need to ask you a few more questions about Pritchard's ranch, if you've got time. Dutch glanced toward the front window, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. This about those missing children? Yeah. You planning on doing something stupid? Probably, but I'm going to try to do it smart at the same time. Malcolm leaned against the counter, keeping his voice low. How many men does Pritchard keep on that ranch? Dutch thought about it. Regular hands, maybe 8 or 10, but he's got 3 or 4 who aren't hands at all. They're guns. Men who know how to fight and aren't particular about why. Names? The one you want to watch for is a man named Cutler. Big bastard. Mean as a rattlesnake, loyal to Pritchard because Pritchard pays him well and asks no questions about his past. Dutch's expression was grim. Word is Cutler killed a man in Tucson over a card game and Pritchard gave him a place to hide. Malcolm filed that away. What about Pritchard himself? What kind of man is he? The careful kind. He doesn't get his own hands dirty, always has someone else do the actual work. But he's smart, knows the law, knows how to make things look legitimate, even when they're rotten to the core. Dutch paused. He comes into town once a week for supplies, always brings 2 men with him, always pays in cash. Acts like a respected rancher, and most people treat him like one because it's easier than asking questions. When's he due back in town? Not until Saturday, 3 days from now. 3 days they didn't have. Malcolm's jaw tightened slightly. What about the children? Anyone in town ever see them? Once in a while. Pritchard claims they're orphans he's training, teaching them ranch work so they can make their own way in the world. Says he's doing charity work. Dutch's voice hardened. But the kids I've seen look scared. Look like they're one wrong word away from a beating. The dark thing in Malcolm's chest coiled tighter. The building where he keeps them. You know anything about it? Used to be a smokehouse before Pritchard converted it, Heavy door, bars on the window like you probably saw, keeps it locked at night, supervised during the day. Dutch looked at Malcolm hard. You're really going to try to get those kids out, aren't you? Yeah, I am. That's likely to get you killed. A lot of things in life are likely to get you killed. Doesn't mean you don't do them. Malcolm straightened up. I need one more thing. You got any lamp oil you can spare? Extra quantity. Dutch's eyes narrowed. What are you planning? Best you don't know. That way, when people ask questions, you can honestly say you don't have answers. Rourke, I'll pay you fair price for the oil, Dutch, and I'll make sure your name doesn't come into it. Malcolm met his eyes. But those kids need help, and I'm the only one standing between them and whatever hell they're living in. So I'm asking, will you sell me lamp oil or not? Dutch was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, walked to the back room, and returned with 4 large bottles of lamp oil. No charge, and I never saw you today. Appreciate it. Malcolm took the bottles, tucked them carefully into his saddlebags. You're a good man, Dutch. Good men don't last long in this territory, but I sleep better knowing I helped than I would knowing I didn't. Dutch extended his hand and Malcolm shook it. You get those kids out safe, you hear me? Don't make me regret this. I'll do my best. Malcolm left the store and was untying Rust when a voice called out from across the street. You there, stranger? Malcolm turned slowly. 3 men were standing in front of the saloon, and even from a distance Malcolm recognized the type. Hard men. Men who wore guns like other people wore hats, casual and necessary. The one who'd called out was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his jawline. Cutler. Had to be. You talking to me? Malcolm kept his voice neutral, his hand near but not on his gun. Don't see any other strangers around. Cutler walked forward, his companions spreading out slightly, flanking positions. Heard you were asking questions about Mr. Pritchard's ranch. Word traveled fast in small towns. Malcolm should have expected it. Just making conversation. I'm a freighter, always interested in who's buying what. That's so. Cutler stopped about 10 feet away, his eyes cold and assessing. Funny thing, though, Dutch Henderson isn't usually interested in selling lamp oil to freighters, but he just sold you 4 bottles of it. Now why would a freighter need that much lamp oil? Malcolm's mind raced, calculating distances, counting enemies, planning moves. 3 against 1, all armed, all experienced. Not good odds. But he'd faced worse. Delivering it to a mining camp up north. They use it for their tunnels. The lie came easy, smooth. Not that it's any of your business, but see, I think it is my business. I think you're lying, and I think you're planning something stupid involving Mr. Pritchard's property. Cutler's hand moved to his gun, not drawing, just resting, a promise. We don't take kindly to thieves around here. Good thing I'm not one then. Malcolm kept his body relaxed, his breathing steady. Fear was useful, but panic would get him killed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got deliveries to make. He started to turn toward Rust when Cutler spoke again, voice hard as iron. You go near that ranch, stranger. You won't walk away. Mr. Pritchard protects what's his. Malcolm stopped, turned back slowly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. Those children aren't his. They're stolen property being returned to their rightful owner, and I don't care how many guns he's got or how mean his dogs are. I'm taking them home. The street went silent. Even the men loading the freight wagon stopped to watch. Cutler's face darkened. You just signed your death warrant. Maybe, but at least I'll die doing something that matters. Malcolm swung up into the saddle, his movements deliberate, controlled. Tell Pritchard if he wants to talk about it, I'll be at his ranch tonight. He can bring all the guns he wants. Won't change how this ends. He rode out of Cedar Springs at a walk, his back to 3 armed men, every muscle tensed and waiting for the bullet he half expected to feel punch between his shoulder blades. But it didn't come. Either they weren't ready to commit murder in front of witnesses, or they wanted to wait until they had the advantage. Malcolm would make sure they never got it. He pushed Rust harder on the way back, the horse sensing his urgency and responding with speed. By the time he reached the camp, the sun was directly overhead, and Lena was pacing like a caged animal. What happened? You're back earlier than I expected. Malcolm dismounted, started unloading the lamp oil from his saddlebags. Change of plans. Pritchard's men know we're coming. We moved tonight like we planned, but we're going to have company. Lena went pale. How did they? Small town, big ears. Doesn't matter how they found out, just matters what we do about it. Malcolm set the bottles down carefully, started checking his weapons again. Here's what's going to happen. Around midnight, I'm going to create a distraction big enough to pull every man on that ranch to the north side of the property. While they're dealing with that, you're going to get to that smokehouse, get the children out, and get them to the wagon. By myself? By yourself. Because I'll be busy making sure none of those men can follow you. Malcolm looked at her, his expression serious. Lena, I need you to understand something. This is going to get violent. People are probably going to get hurt. And I need you to be okay with that because your children's lives depend on you not hesitating. I won't hesitate. Her voice was steady. What do you need me to do? For the next several hours, Malcolm laid out the plan in detail. He showed her the route from the smokehouse to the wagon, made her repeat it back to him 3 times. He explained how to pick the lock on the door, a skill he'd learned during his less respectable years, and made her practice on the lockbox from his supplies until she could do it quickly and quietly. He showed her how to move silently, how to use shadows, how to avoid being seen even when people were looking. All the skills he'd picked up in 32 years of surviving in places that didn't forgive mistakes. And Lena, desperate and determined and absolutely focused, absorbed every word like her life depended on it. Because it did. Her children's lives depended on it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Malcolm started preparing the distraction. He took the 4 bottles of lamp oil, several lengths of rope, and some old rags and created what amounted to primitive firebombs. You're going to burn down his ranch, Lena said, watching him work. Part of it, anyway. The hay barn specifically. It's far enough from the main buildings that no one should get hurt, close enough to create chaos. Malcolm soaked another rag in oil, stuffed it into a bottle. Fire spreads fast in dry country. They'll have to fight it or lose everything. That's when you move. And you? What happens to you while I'm getting the children? I'll be making sure no one follows you. Then I'll circle back, meet you at the wagon, and we'll ride hard for Cedar Springs. Malcolm finished the last bottle, wiped his hands clean. Dutch will give us shelter until we can figure out next steps. This is insane. Yeah, but it's the only play we've got. Malcolm stood, looked at her directly. You can still back out. I can try to do this alone. No. Lena's voice was firm. They're my children. I'm getting them back. Good. Then we rest for a few hours, then we move. They tried to rest, but neither of them could really sleep. The tension was too high, the stakes too clear. Malcolm lay on his bedroll staring at the stars, mentally rehearsing the plan, looking for holes, for mistakes, for the thing he might have forgotten that could get them all killed. Beside him, Lena was equally restless, her breathing shallow and quick. Malcolm? Her voice cut through the darkness. Yeah? If something goes wrong, if I don't make it, promise me you'll still get them out. Promise me you won't leave them there. Nothing's going wrong. But if it does, Lena, look at me. Malcolm rolled onto his side, could just barely make out her face in the starlight. I promise you, those children are getting out of there tonight. Both of them, safe and whole. And so are you. I don't break my promises. You can't know that. No. But I believe it. And right now, belief is all we've got to work with. He reached out, found her hand in the darkness, squeezed it once. We're going to do this. Together. And tomorrow, you're going to wake up with your children beside you. You hear me? Her hand squeezed back, trembling but strong. I hear you. They stayed like that for a moment, 2 people in the darkness holding on to hope with both hands. Then Malcolm released her hand and stood up. It's time. They moved through the night like ghosts, Malcolm carrying the firebombs in a canvas sack, Lena carrying nothing but her determination and the lockpicks Malcolm had given her. The ranch was quiet when they reached it, just a few lights burning in the bunkhouse and main house. Malcolm positioned Lena behind the same rocky outcropping where they'd watched the night before, close enough to reach the smokehouse quickly, far enough to stay hidden. Remember the plan, he whispered. Wait for the fire. When you see everyone running toward it, you move. Get to the smokehouse, get the door open, Get the kids. Get back to the wagon. Don't wait for me. If I'm not there by dawn, you ride for Cedar Springs and you don't look back. Malcolm, don't argue. Those children need their mother more than they need me. He touched her shoulder briefly. I'll see you at the wagon. Then he was gone, moving through the shadows toward the hay barn on the north side of the property. Malcolm counted guards, 4 visible, probably 2 more inside, and calculated timing. He needed to give Lena enough chaos to move, but not so much that innocent people died. It was a fine line. He reached the hay barn without being spotted, found the door unlocked, slipped inside. The smell of dried grass and horse sweat was thick in the air. Perfect kindling. Malcolm pulled out the first bottle, lit the rag with a match, and threw it into the far corner. The bottle shattered, and flame bloomed instantly, spreading across the dry hay like it was hungry. He lit and threw the second bottle, then the third, spacing them out to ensure the fire would spread fast and hot. The fourth bottle he saved. By the time he slipped back outside, the barn was already roaring with flame, and someone was shouting an alarm. Men poured out of the bunkhouse, some still pulling on pants, all of them running toward the fire. Malcolm waited until he saw Cutler emerge from the main house. Then he stepped out of the shadows where the man could see him. "Hey, Cutler! Looking for me?" Cutler's head whipped around, his hand going for his gun. Malcolm threw the fourth bottle at his feet and it exploded in a wash of flame, forcing the big man to leap backward. "You son of a—" But Malcolm was already running, drawing Cutler and 2 other men away from the chaos, away from the smokehouse, away from Lena. He heard gunfire behind him, felt a bullet whip past his ear close enough to feel the heat, and kept running. He led them on a chase through the darkness, using every rock and tree for cover, firing back when he could, always moving, always staying ahead. His lungs burned and his legs ached, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop, because every second he kept these men focused on him was a second Lena had to get her children to safety. Behind him, the hay barn was a pillar of fire reaching toward the sky, and Malcolm could hear men shouting, could see the organized chaos as they formed bucket lines and tried to save what they could. Cutler and his men were still chasing Malcolm, still firing, getting closer. Malcolm ducked behind a boulder, fired twice, heard one man cry out and fall. 2 left. He ran again, his path circling back toward where he'd left Russ tied and hidden. If he could reach the horse, he could outrun them, could make it back to the wagon where hopefully Lena and the children would be waiting. A bullet hit the ground inches from his foot, and Malcolm dove behind a fallen log, rolled, came up firing. His shot took the second man in the shoulder, and he went down hard. Just Cutler now. Malcolm reloaded as he ran, his fingers working on muscle memory alone. He could hear Cutler behind him, closer now, the big man's breathing harsh and angry in the night air. "You're dead, stranger! You hear me? Dead!" Malcolm burst into the clearing where he'd left Rust, and the horse whinnied, nervous from the gunfire and smoke. Malcolm was reaching for the saddle when something slammed into his back and drove him to the ground. Cutler. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and fury, and Malcolm's rifle went flying. Cutler was bigger, heavier, using his weight to pin Malcolm down, while his fist hammered into Malcolm's ribs, his face, anywhere he could reach. Malcolm twisted, got a knee up between them, shoved hard. Cutler rolled off, and Malcolm scrambled to his feet, tasting blood, his head ringing. The big man came at him again, and Malcolm ducked under a wild swing, drove his shoulder into Cutler's gut, lifted and threw him. Cutler hit the ground hard, but came up fast, pulling a knife. The blade gleamed in the firelight, still visible from the burning barn. "Should have minded your own business," Cutler growled. "Should have, but I got a bad habit of helping people who need it." Malcolm pulled his own knife, the familiar weight of it steadying. "Last chance to walk away." "Not until you're dead." They circled each other, 2 predators looking for an opening. Cutler feinted left and Malcolm didn't bite, stayed balanced, stayed ready. The big man was strong, but Malcolm was faster, and he'd learned to fight from men who didn't believe in fair. Cutler lunged and Malcolm sidestepped, his blade opening a line across the big man's forearm. Cutler cursed, switched the knife to his other hand, came again. This time when Malcolm dodged, his foot caught on a root and he stumbled. It was all the opening Cutler needed. He was on Malcolm in an instant, the knife driving down toward Malcolm's chest. Malcolm caught his wrist with both hands, muscles straining, the blade inches from his heart. Cutler pressed down with all his weight, and Malcolm felt his arms beginning to give, felt the knife getting closer, felt his strength failing. Then he remembered what was at stake, remembered 2 children locked in a smokehouse, remembered a mother who'd trusted him to help her, remembered the promise he'd made. Malcolm roared and twisted, using Cutler's own momentum against him, redirecting the knife past his body and into the ground. Before Cutler could recover, Malcolm drove his own blade up and under the big man's ribs. Cutler's eyes went wide. He made a wet, choking sound and fell sideways. Malcolm rolled away, gasping, pain shooting through his ribs where Cutler's fists had landed. He checked the body once to make sure the threat was done, then stumbled to Rust and hauled himself into the saddle. Behind him, the ranch was still in chaos, men still fighting the fire, still shouting. Malcolm turned Rust toward the wagon and urged the horse into a run. Please let them be there. Please let them be safe. The ride back felt like it took hours, though it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. When Malcolm finally saw the wagon in the pre-dawn light, his heart nearly stopped. Lena was there. And she wasn't alone. 2 small figures huddled against her, wrapped in blankets, their faces pressed against her chest as she held them like she would never let go. Mara and Finn. Even from a distance, Malcolm could see they were thin, scared, exhausted. But they were alive, they were together, they were free. Lena looked up as Malcolm rode in, and her face was wet with tears, but her eyes were shining with something Malcolm hadn't seen before. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated, overwhelming joy. "We did it," she said, her voice breaking. "Malcolm, we did it. We got them back." Malcolm dismounted slowly, his body protesting every movement. He walked over to the wagon and looked down at the children. Mara stared back at him with dark eyes that had seen too much, protective of her younger brother even now. Finn peeked out from behind Lena's shoulder, curious but cautious. "These your babies?" Malcolm asked Lena softly. "These are my babies." Lena kissed the top of Mara's head, then Finn's. "Mara, Finn, this is Malcolm. He helped Mama find you. He helped bring you home." Mara studied Malcolm with an intensity that reminded him of Lena. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice small but clear. "You're welcome, little miss." Malcolm looked at Lena. "We need to move. Now. Those men will come looking once they get the fire under control." Lena nodded and helped the children into the back of the wagon, wrapping them in every blanket Malcolm had. Malcolm hitched Revenue alongside Rust and climbed onto the driver's bench, his ribs screaming with every movement. "You're hurt," Lena said, seeing the blood on his face, the way he was moving. "I'm alive. That's what matters." Malcolm clicked his tongue and the team started forward. "We'll be in Cedar Springs by full light. Dutch will help us figure out the next steps." As the wagon rolled through the darkness, leaving the burning ranch behind, Malcolm heard soft voices from the back. Lena talking to her children, reassuring them, telling them they were safe now, telling them Mama was here and would never let them go again. And Finn's small voice, full of wonder and relief. "I knew you'd come, Mama. I told Mara you'd come find us." "Of course I came, baby. Of course Mama came." Malcolm kept his eyes on the road ahead, his hands steady on the reins, and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Pride. Not in himself, but in what they'd accomplished together. In the fact that 2 stolen children were going home. In the fact that love and determination and a little bit of courage had been enough to beat back the darkness, at least for tonight. The sun was rising when they finally reached Cedar Springs, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Dutch was already awake, sweeping the porch in front of his store. When he saw Malcolm's wagon roll in with Lena and 2 children in the back, he set down his broom and nodded once. Some things didn't need words. Dutch took one look at Malcolm's battered face, and the 2 frightened children huddled in the wagon bed and jerked his head toward the back of his store. No questions, no hesitation, just the quiet efficiency of a man who understood when to help and when to stay silent. "Bring them inside. Back room's got a cot and some space. You can rest there until we figure things out." Malcolm helped Lena and the children down from the wagon, while Dutch quickly unhitched the team and led them to a small stable behind the store. The street was still mostly empty, just a few early risers heading to their work, but Malcolm knew that wouldn't last. Small towns woke up fast, and news traveled faster. Inside the back room, Lena settled the children on the cot, wrapping them in blankets Dutch provided. Mara sat with her arm around Finn, both of them silent and watchful, their eyes tracking every movement Malcolm and Dutch made. "You hungry?" Dutch asked the children gently. "I've got some bread and honey, maybe some milk." Mara looked at Lena, waiting for permission. The gesture broke Malcolm's heart a little. The way she'd learned not to trust anyone, not even simple kindness. "It's okay, sweetheart," Lena said softly. "You can eat. You're safe now." Dutch brought food and the children ate slowly at first, then faster as their bodies remembered what hunger felt like and demanded more. Malcolm watched them, seeing the dirt under their fingernails, the bruises on their arms, the way they flinched at sudden sounds. 2 months. 2 months of whatever hell Pritchard had put them through. "Let me look at that face," Dutch said to Malcolm, pulling out a basin of water and some clean rags. "You look like you got stomped by a mule." "Feels like it too." Malcolm sat down heavily, letting Dutch clean the blood from his face. His ribs were screaming, his knuckles were split, and he was pretty sure he'd cracked something in his left hand. But he was alive, and the children were safe. That was enough. Lena sat with Mara and Finn, holding their hands, stroking their hair, murmuring soft reassurances. Malcolm could see the questions in her eyes, questions about what had happened to them, about who had hurt them, about things she probably didn't want to know, but needed to. But those questions could wait. Right now, the children just needed to know they were loved. "Pritchard's going to come looking," Dutch said quietly, dabbing at a cut above Malcolm's eye. "He's not the kind of man who lets things go." "I know, that's why we can't stay long." Malcolm winced as Dutch pressed too hard on a particularly deep cut. "Few hours to rest, then we need to move. I'm thinking Prescott. Bigger town, easier to disappear. Prescott's 3 days' ride from here. You really think you can make it that far before Pritchard catches up? Don't have much choice. Staying here puts you at risk, and I won't do that to you." Malcolm looked over at Lena and the children. "Besides, those kids need a doctor, need proper food, proper rest. They need more than we can give them hiding in the back of a general store." Dutch finished cleaning Malcolm's wounds and sat back. "There might be another option." "I'm listening." "I've got a cousin who runs a homestead about 40 miles west of here near Sanida. Place is pretty isolated off the main roads. She's a widow, lives alone, could probably use the help." Dutch kept his voice low. "You get there, you could rest up properly, let those kids heal, maybe even stay a while if you wanted." Malcolm considered it. 40 miles was a good distance, and if the place was isolated enough, Pritchard might not think to look there. "This cousin of yours, she trustworthy?" "Sarah's good people. Lost her husband 3 years back to fever, been trying to keep the place running by herself ever since. She's tough, smart, and she doesn't ask questions she doesn't need answers to." Dutch pulled out a piece of paper and sketched a rough map. "Follow the creek west until you hit the old mission ruins, then north through the canyon. Homestead's in a valley just beyond. You tell her Dutch sent you, she'll take you in." "Why are you doing this?" Malcolm asked. "You don't know us. Don't owe us anything." Dutch was quiet for a moment, staring at the children. "I had a daughter once. She'd be about Mara's age now if she'd lived. Died of scarlet fever when she was 3. His voice was rough with old grief. "I see those kids. I see what could have been, and I figure if I can't save my own, least I can do is help save someone else's." Malcolm understood that kind of pain, the kind that never quite healed but taught you how to be better. "Thank you, Dutch, for all of it." "Don't thank me yet. You still got to get there alive." Dutch stood up, went to a cabinet, and pulled out a box of ammunition and some supplies. "Take these. And take this too." He handed Malcolm a small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. "Should be enough to keep you fed for a few weeks. I can't. You can, and you will. Consider it an investment in doing the right thing." Dutch's expression was firm. "Now rest while you can. I'll keep watch, let you know if anyone comes asking questions." Malcolm wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at him like weights tied to his bones. He nodded his thanks and moved to the corner of the room, easing himself down against the wall where he could see the door and the children both. Lena looked over at him, her eyes full of gratitude and something else, something that looked like the beginning of trust becoming something deeper. "Sleep," Malcolm said quietly. "I'll keep watch. You need rest more than I do. You're the one who's hurt." I'm the one who's used to it. Sleep, Lena. Your children need you strong. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded and curled up on the cot with Mara and Finn, one arm around each of them. Within minutes, all three were asleep, their breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of exhaustion, finally finding relief. Malcolm sat in the corner and let his eyes drift half-closed, his body resting but his mind still alert. Through the thin walls he could hear the town waking up, doors opening, voices calling out, the normal sounds of life continuing while his own had taken a sharp turn into unknown territory. He thought about Dutch's cousin and the homestead near Sanida. Thought about what it would mean to stay in one place for more than a few days, to put down roots however temporary. He'd been moving for so long, keeping himself simple and unattached, that the idea of stopping felt strange. But as he watched Lena sleep with her children safe beside her, Malcolm realized something had already changed. He'd made himself responsible for these three people in a way that went beyond simple charity. He'd made himself part of their story, and they'd become part of his. The question was what happened next. Dutch came back a few hours later with more food, soup thick with vegetables and meat, fresh bread still warm from the oven, milk for the children. Lena woke when she smelled the food, and the children followed, drawn by hunger that was starting to feel normal again instead of desperate. They ate together in the back room, Mara and Finn slowly relaxing as their stomachs filled and the warmth of safety began to seep into their bones. Finn even smiled once, a small quick thing that disappeared as fast as it came, but Lena saw it, and her eyes filled with tears. "Mama, why are you crying?" Finn asked, his voice worried. "Happy tears, baby. Just happy tears because you're here and you're safe." Lena pulled him close, kissed the top of his head. "Mama's so happy." Mara watched Malcolm over her bowl of soup, her dark eyes studying him with an intensity that reminded him of Lena. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, but clear. "Are you going to stay with us?" The question caught Malcolm off guard. He glanced at Lena, saw her watching him too, waiting for his answer. "For a while," he said carefully, "until I know you're all safe and settled." "And then what?" It was a fair question, a smart question. This child had already learned that adults left, that promises were fragile, that safety was temporary. "Then we'll see," Malcolm said honestly. "But I promise you this, little miss, I won't leave until I know you and your brother and your mama are going to be okay. That's a promise." Mara studied him for another moment, then nodded once, accepting his words. She went back to her soup, but Malcolm noticed she sat a little closer to him now, as if his promise had earned some small measure of trust. They rested through the afternoon while Dutch kept watch. Around sunset, Dutch came back with news that made Malcolm's jaw tighten. 4 riders just came into town, Pritchard's men. They're asking questions at the saloon, showing people a description of a woman and 2 children. Dutch's voice was urgent. "You need to leave, now." Malcolm was already moving, gathering their few supplies, checking his weapons. Lena bundled the children back into their blankets, despite their protests that they weren't tired. "I don't want to go back," Finn said, his voice rising with fear. "Please don't make us go back." "We're not going back, baby. We're going somewhere safe." Lena looked at Malcolm, her eyes wide with worry. "Right?" "Right. Dutch's cousin has a place west of here. We're going to stay with her for a while." Malcolm helped them into the wagon, moving quickly but trying not to show the panic he felt. 4 men, armed and looking for them. They needed distance, and they needed it now. Dutch brought the team around, already hitched and ready. "Follow the map I gave you. Don't stop until you reach the mission ruins, then only long enough to rest the horses. You should make Sarah's place by tomorrow afternoon if you push hard." "What about you, when they find out you helped us?" "They won't. Far as anyone in this town knows, I sold you some supplies this morning, and that's the last I saw of you." Dutch gripped Malcolm's shoulder. "You take care of that family, Rourke. They've been through enough." "I will. And Dutch, thank you for everything." Dutch just nodded, then stepped back as Malcolm clicked the team into motion. They rolled out of Cedar Springs as the sun was setting, taking the back streets to avoid the main road where Pritchard's men might see them. Malcolm kept the horses at a steady trot, fast enough to put distance between them and the town, but not so fast they'd wear out before morning. Beside him, Lena sat rigid with tension, one hand gripping the bench, the other reaching back to touch the children every few minutes, as if to reassure herself they were still there. "Are we going to make it?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, we're going to make it." Malcolm hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. "Those men don't know which direction we went, and by the time they figure it out, we'll have a good lead on them. And if they catch up? They won't." But Malcolm kept his rifle close anyway, and his eyes on the horizon behind them, watching for dust clouds that might signal riders giving chase. They traveled through the night, following the creek by moonlight, the wagon rocking over rough ground that was barely a road at all. The children slept fitfully in the back, waking at every bump and jolt, but Lena stayed awake, her presence steady beside Malcolm. "Can I ask you something?" she said after hours of silence. "Go ahead." "Why didn't you leave us? Back at Cedar Springs, you could have given us some money, pointed us in a direction, and been done with it. Why are you still here?" Malcolm thought about it, about all the reasons and the truth that lay beneath them. "I told you already. I don't quit things." "That's not all of it, though, is it?" "No." Malcolm was quiet for a moment. "When I was 17, I was hungry and desperate and one bad decision away from dead. A man named Abraham Talbot gave me a job and treated me like I mattered. He didn't have to. I gave him no reason to trust me. But he did anyway, and it changed my life." "So this is about paying it forward?" "Partly, but it's also—" Malcolm struggled to find the words. "It's also about choosing who you want to be. Every day we make choices that define us, that build the person we're becoming. And I decided a long time ago that I wanted to be the kind of man who helps when he can, who does the right thing even when it's hard, who stands up for people who can't stand up for themselves." Lena was quiet, absorbing his words. "That man, Abraham Talbot, he taught you that?" "He taught me a lot of things. Most important was that your name should mean something, that when people hear it, they should know you're someone worth trusting." Malcolm glanced at her. "That's why I told you my last name that first night, because I wanted you to know that if you needed help, if you came back, Malcolm Rourke was someone who would keep his word." "You did. You kept your word." Lena's voice was soft. "You got my children back." "We got your children back. You're the one who had the courage to keep looking, to not give up. I just helped along the way." They fell into silence again, but it was different now, comfortable. The kind of quiet that existed between people who understood each other, who'd been through something together that created a bond deeper than words. The mission ruins appeared around noon the next day, crumbling adobe walls rising from the desert like broken teeth. Malcolm pulled the wagon into the shade of what had once been the chapel and let the horses rest and drink from the creek that ran past. Mara and Finn climbed out of the wagon on shaky legs, stiff from the long ride. They were quiet, subdued, moving close to Lena like satellites orbiting a sun. Malcolm understood. They'd been torn from her once. They weren't going to let her out of their sight now. While the horses rested, Lena took the children to the creek to wash. Malcolm kept watch, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. He saw nothing but empty desert and blue sky, but that didn't mean they were safe. When they returned, Finn approached Malcolm shyly, holding something in his hand. "I found this," the boy said, holding out a small white stone worn smooth by water. "It's for you, for helping us." Malcolm took the stone, feeling its weight in his palm, feeling the weight of the gesture even more. "Thank you, Finn. That's real kind of you." Finn smiled, that same quick flash Malcolm had seen in Dutch's back room, and ran back to his mother. Malcolm slipped the stone into his pocket, a small, smooth reminder of why this mattered. They pressed on through the afternoon, following Dutch's directions through a narrow canyon where the walls rose steep on either side and the shadows were deep and cool. Malcolm felt exposed here, trapped between rock with nowhere to go if trouble found them. But the canyon eventually opened into a wide valley, and there, nestled against the far hillside, was the homestead. It wasn't much. A small house built of adobe and timber, a barn that had seen better days, a corral with a few horses, and a garden plot where green things struggled to grow in the harsh soil. But there was smoke coming from the chimney and chickens scratching in the yard, and the whole place had an air of stubborn survival that Malcolm recognized. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, a rifle cradled casually in her arms. She was tall, lean, probably in her late 30s, with sun-weathered skin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "That's far enough," she called out when they were still 20 yards away. "State your business." "Dutch Henderson sent us," Malcolm called back, keeping his hands visible, movements slow. "Said you might have room for some travelers needing a place to rest." The woman's expression shifted slightly. "Dutch sent you?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm Malcolm Rourke. This is Lena Calder and her children, Mara and Finn. We've had some trouble, and Dutch thought you might be willing to help." Sarah, because this had to be Dutch's cousin Sarah, studied them for a long moment. Malcolm could practically see her taking inventory, the exhaustion in their faces, the fear in the children's eyes, the way Lena held them close, the cuts and bruises on Malcolm's face. She lowered the rifle. "Any trouble following you?" "Possibly. We've been careful, but the men looking for us are determined." "What kind of trouble are we talking about?" "The kind where children got stolen and we got them back. The kind where the man who took them doesn't want to let it go." Sarah's jaw tightened. She looked at Mara and Finn, saw something in their faces that made her decision. "Put your wagon in the barn. Horses, too. You can stay in the house for now. We'll figure out the rest later." Relief flooded through Malcolm. "Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate—" "Save it. I haven't decided if I like you yet, but Dutch trusts you and I trust Dutch, so that'll do for now." Sarah turned toward the house. "There's stew on the stove and bread in the cupboard. Help yourselves. I'll be back after I check the perimeter." She walked away before Malcolm could respond, moving with the confident stride of someone who knew every inch of her land and how to defend it. Malcolm helped Lena and the children down from the wagon, then drove it into the barn as instructed. The barn was cluttered but organized. Tools hung on walls, hay stacked neatly, everything in its place, the work of someone who lived alone and couldn't afford chaos. Inside the house, they found a single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with two smaller rooms branching off, one clearly Sarah's bedroom, the other appearing to be storage. The stew smelled incredible, rich with meat and vegetables, and the bread was fresh enough to still be warm. Lena fed the children first, making sure they ate slowly, making sure they had enough. Malcolm watched her, saw the fierce protectiveness in every gesture, every careful spoonful. She'd always been their mother, but now she was their guardian too, their defender, the wall between them and a world that had proven it could be cruel. When the children had eaten their fill and were curled up together on a blanket by the fireplace, Lena finally let herself eat. Malcolm saw her hands shaking as she lifted the spoon to her mouth, saw the moment the food hit her stomach, and her body remembered it had needs beyond simple survival. "Eat more," Malcolm said quietly. "You've been running on nothing for too long." "So have you. I'm used to it. You need to keep your strength up for them." He nodded toward the children. "They're going to need you in the days ahead." Lena ate another bowl of stew, then set the spoon down and looked at Malcolm directly. "What happens now? We can't stay here forever. Sarah doesn't even know us." "We stay until the children are stronger, until we know Pritchard's men have given up looking. Then we figure out what comes next." Malcolm leaned back in his chair, feeling every bruise, every ache. "One step at a time, Lena. That's all we can do." Sarah returned as the sun was setting, still carrying her rifle, still watchful. She looked at the children sleeping by the fire, at Lena sitting exhausted at the table, at Malcolm trying to hide how much pain he was in. "The tall one's ribs are cracked," she said to Lena, pointing at Malcolm. "Maybe broken. He needs binding." "I'm fine," Malcolm protested. "You're not, but you're stubborn, which I can respect." Sarah set her rifle by the door and pulled out a wooden box from under a shelf. "I've got bandages and willow bark for the pain. You can accept help or you can sit there hurting. Your choice." Malcolm knew when he was beaten. Bandages would be good. Sarah bound his ribs with practiced efficiency, wrapping the cloth tight enough to support but not so tight he couldn't breathe. Malcolm gritted his teeth through it, refusing to show how much it hurt. "You've done this before," he said. "Lost my husband 3 years back, but before that, he was always breaking something or other. Man couldn't go a month without needing patching up." Sarah's voice was matter of fact, but Malcolm heard the grief underneath. "You'll do. Ribs'll heal in a few weeks if you don't do anything stupid." "I'll try." "Trying's not good enough. You're responsible for that woman and those children now." Act like it. Malcolm met her eyes and saw the challenge there, the test. I am acting like it. That's why we're here. Sarah held his gaze for another moment, then nodded once. Good. Then we understand each other. She turned to Lena. You and the children can take the storage room. I'll clear it out, make it livable. Rourke can sleep in the barn. I appreciate it, ma'am, but I should stay close in case trouble comes, you'll hear it from the barn same as you would from the house. And those children have been through enough without having a strange man sleeping in the same room. Sarah's tone left no room for argument. You want to protect them? Give them space to feel safe. She was right, and Malcolm knew it. The barn's fine. Thank you. Over the next hour, Sarah transformed the storage room into a simple but functional space, clearing out crates and tools, laying down blankets, setting up a small lamp. Lena helped where she could, grateful for something to do with her hands, grateful for Sarah's brisk efficiency that demanded no emotional explanations. When the room was ready, Lena carried first Finn, then Mara, to their new beds. Both children stirred but didn't wake, too exhausted to notice they'd been moved. Lena tucked blankets around them, smoothed their hair, and just sat there for a long moment, watching them breathe. Malcolm stood in the doorway, giving her space but staying close enough to see. He watched her shoulders shake with silent sobs, watched her press her hand to her mouth to keep from waking the children, watched her break apart now that they were finally, truly safe. He started to back away, to give her privacy, but Lena looked up and saw him. Don't go, she whispered. Please. I need to know someone else is here, that this is real. Malcolm stepped into the room and sat down against the wall, far enough away to be respectful, close enough to be present. I'm here. It's real. Your children are safe. Because of you. Because of us. Malcolm's voice was gentle but firm. You're the one who never gave up, Lena. You're the one who had the courage to keep fighting even when everything looked impossible. I just helped along the way. You did more than help. Her voice broke. You gave me back my whole world. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the children breathe, listening to the night sounds outside. Eventually, Lena's tears stopped and she wiped her face with the back of her hand. What you said earlier, about your name meaning something, about being someone worth trusting. She looked at him. You are, Malcolm. You're exactly that kind of person. I'm trying to be. You are. She stood up slowly, exhausted beyond measure. Thank you. For everything. For being here. For not giving up on us. Never going to give up on you. The words came out before Malcolm could stop them, carrying more weight than he'd intended. He stood quickly. You should rest. Tomorrow we can start figuring out what comes next. Lena nodded, but before Malcolm could leave, she reached out and took his hand. Her grip was warm, certain, grounding. Good night, Malcolm. Good night, Lena. He walked to the barn through darkness thick with stars, his hand still warm from her touch, his mind full of questions he didn't have answers for. Sarah was waiting by the barn door, leaning against the frame, watching him approach. That woman's been through hell, she said without preamble. I know. So have those children. I know that too. And you've made yourself responsible for all of them. It wasn't a question. Yeah, I have. Sarah studied him in the starlight. You planning on staying, or you going to move them along once they're rested? Malcolm hadn't let himself think that far ahead, hadn't let himself consider what staying might mean. I don't know yet. Depends on what Lena wants, what's safe for the children. Uh-huh. Sarah's tone suggested she didn't quite believe him. Well, while you're figuring it out, you can make yourself useful around here. Place needs work, and I can't do it all alone. You help out. You can stay as long as you need. That's generous of you. That's practical. I need help. You need a place to hide. We help each other. That's how survival works out here. She pushed off from the doorframe. Barn's yours. Bedrolls in the tack room. Don't oversleep. We start early. She walked back to the house, leaving Malcolm alone with his thoughts and the quiet sounds of the night. He found the bedroll, laid it out in the empty stall, and eased himself down with a groan his ribs protested. His body was battered and his future was uncertain, But as Malcolm lay there, staring up at the barn rafters, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not just the simple purpose of moving freight from one place to another, of making money and surviving another day. Real purpose. The kind that came from being part of something bigger than yourself. From mattering to people who mattered to you. Malcolm Rourke had spent 10 years keeping himself simple and unattached, and in the space of 3 days, a desperate mother and her stolen children had changed everything. Tomorrow they'd start building something new. Tomorrow they'd begin healing. Tomorrow they'd take the first steps toward whatever future waited for them in this harsh, beautiful, unforgiving land. But tonight, Malcolm closed his eyes and let himself rest, knowing that sometimes the best thing a man could do was simply be there when people needed him. And he'd never been better at anything in his life. Malcolm woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and pale light filtering through the cracks in the barn walls. His ribs protested every breath, his muscles screamed from sleeping on hard ground, and his face felt like it had been used as an anvil. But he was alive, and more importantly, so were Lena and her children. He rolled to his feet with a groan and stepped outside to find Sarah already working, mucking out the horse stalls with practiced efficiency. She looked up when she heard him approach, took in his stiff movements, and shook her head. "You look worse than yesterday." "Feel worse than yesterday, too." Malcolm walked over to the well, drew up a bucket of cold water, and splashed it over his face. The shock of it cleared some of the fog from his head. "What needs doing?" "Fence on the east pasture's down. Needs mending before the horses get ideas about wandering." Sarah pointed toward a section of corral where several rails hung loose. "Tools are in the barn. You know how to work with your hands?" "Been doing it my whole life." "Good. Then get to it. I'll check on your people in the house." Malcolm gathered the tools and got to work, his body settling into the familiar rhythm of physical labor. The pain in his ribs was sharp at first, but dulled to a manageable ache as he moved. He'd worked through worse. By the time the sun was fully up, he'd repaired 3 sections of fence and was starting on the 4th when Lena emerged from the house carrying a cup of coffee. She looked better than she had the night before, still exhausted, still haunted, but with some color back in her face. "Sarah said I'd find you out here." She handed him the coffee and leaned against the fence, watching him work. "You should be resting." "Should be, but Sarah's right. Place needs work, and I can't sit idle." Malcolm took a long drink of the coffee, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. "How are the kids?" "Still sleeping. Sarah says that's good, that they need it." Lena's voice was soft, grateful. "She also said you've already fixed half her broken fence." "Not half, but I'm making progress." Malcolm hammered another nail into place. "Sarah's good people. We're lucky Dutch sent us here." "We're lucky you didn't ride away that first night in the desert." Lena watched him work for a moment, then spoke again, her voice careful. "Malcolm, what happens when we leave here? Where do we go?" Malcolm set down the hammer and looked at her directly. "That depends on what you want, Lena. What you need." "I need my children to be safe. I need them to grow up without fear, without hunger, without men who think they can be bought and sold." Her hands clenched into fists. "I need to never feel that helpless again." "Then we make sure you don't." Malcolm picked up another rail, tested its weight. "But that means more than just running. It means finding a place you can build something permanent. Somewhere you can put down roots." "I don't have money for that. I don't have anything except 2 children and the clothes on my back." "You have more than you think. You have courage, strength, and a will that wouldn't break even when it should have." Malcolm positioned the rail, started hammering. "Money can be earned. Land can be worked. What matters is whether you're willing to try." Lena was quiet for a long moment. "Are you saying we should stay here with Sarah?" "I'm saying Sarah needs help and you need a place. Seems like that could work for everyone if she's willing." Malcolm finished securing the rail and straightened up. "But that's only part of it. The other part is making sure Pritchard can't come after you again." "How do we do that?" "We make it legal. We get the law involved. Make it official that those children belong to you and no one else has any claim to them." Malcolm's voice was firm. "I'll ride to Prescott, file papers with the territorial court, make sure there's documentation that you're their mother and they were stolen. Make it so Pritchard can't touch them without facing federal charges." "That could take weeks." "Probably, but it's the only way to make sure this ends for good. Malcolm met her eyes. I'm not going to let him take them from you again, Lena. Not now, not ever. The conviction in his voice made something shift in Lena's expression. You really mean that? Every word. Sarah appeared from the barn carrying a bucket of feed for the chickens. She scattered the grain and watched the birds scramble for it, then turned to Malcolm and Lena. You two planning on standing around talking all day, or are you planning on being useful? Planning on being useful, ma'am, Malcolm said. Good. Then when you're done with that fence, the roof on the chicken coop needs patching. And Lena, those children need breakfast, and I need help with the garden. Weeds don't pull themselves. They worked through the morning, falling into a rhythm that felt strangely natural. Malcolm repaired fence and roof, his hands remembering skills he'd learned years ago when he'd worked for Abraham Talbot. Lena helped Sarah in the garden, pulling weeds and learning which plants were vegetables and which were just stubborn desert growth pretending to belong. Mara and Finn emerged around mid-morning, moving slowly, staying close to each other. Sarah took one look at them and put them to work too. Gentle work, safe work, collecting eggs from the hens and filling water troughs. The kind of work that made them feel useful without overwhelming them. Malcolm watched Finn approach a chicken cautiously, saw the boy's face light up when the hen didn't peck him, heard his delighted laugh when he found an egg still warm in the nest. It was the first real laugh Malcolm had heard from the child, and it made everything they'd been through feel worth it. By noon, they were all exhausted, but in a good way, the kind of tired that came from honest work instead of fear. Sarah made lunch from what they had, beans and cornbread, simple but filling, and they ate together at the rough-hewn table in the house. You're good workers, Sarah said, addressing the whole group. Better than I expected. We pull our weight, Malcolm said. I can see that. Sarah looked at Lena. Dutch's letter said you were running from trouble. You planning on telling me what kind? Lena glanced at the children who were focused on their food, then back to Sarah. The kind where my children were stolen and sold, the kind where we got them back and the man who took them wants them returned. Sarah's expression hardened. Name? Josiah Pritchard, runs the Smoking Jay Ranch near Cedar Springs. I know the name, know the reputation too. Sarah's voice was cold. Man's been doing that for years, taking children no one will miss and working them like slaves. Law won't touch him because he keeps everything looking legal on paper. We burned his barn and took 6 children when we got mine back, Lena said quietly. He's not going to let that go. No, he won't. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. How many men does he have? At least 8 that we saw, maybe more. Malcolm pushed his plate away. I killed one of them, a man named Cutler, when we got the children out. That's going to make Pritchard even more determined. Sarah absorbed this information without flinching. You killed a man to save children. That's justified in my book. But it also means Pritchard won't stop until he gets revenge or dies trying. I know. That's why I need to go to Prescott, make this legal so he can't claim the children are his property. And while you're gone, what's to stop him from coming here? Me, Sarah said flatly. This is my land. I defend it. Anyone comes here looking for trouble, they'll find it. Malcolm studied her, seeing the steel underneath the weathered exterior. You've defended it before. More than once. Lost my husband to fever, but before that we had to fight off claim jumpers, thieves, and worse. I know how to shoot, and I know how to hold ground. Sarah looked at Lena and the children. You stay here, you work hard, you become part of this place. I'll protect you same as I protect everything that's mine. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you do this for strangers? Because Dutch asked me to. Because those children deserve better, and because... Sarah's voice softened slightly. Because I know what it's like to lose everything and have to rebuild from nothing. If I can help someone else avoid that, I will. That afternoon, Malcolm prepared to leave for Prescott. He checked his weapons, replenished his supplies from what Sarah could spare, and made sure Rust was rested and ready for the hard ride ahead. Lena found him in the barn as he was saddling the horse. How long will you be gone? 4 days there, maybe a week in Prescott dealing with the courts, 4 days back. Call it 2 weeks if everything goes smooth. Malcolm tightened the cinch strap. Longer if there are complications. 2 weeks is a long time. I know, but it's necessary. He turned to face her. Sarah will keep you safe while I'm gone, and when I get back, we'll have legal protection. Papers that say those children are yours, and anyone who tries to take them is breaking federal law. What if something happens to you? What if Pritchard's men? They won't. I'll be careful. Malcolm reached out and took her hand, the gesture feeling natural now, right? I made you a promise, Lena. I said I wouldn't quit until your children were safe. I'm keeping that promise. You've already done so much. Not enough. Not until this is finished. Malcolm squeezed her hand once, then released it. You trust Sarah while I'm gone. Do what she says. Learn from her. This place could be good for you and the kids if you let it. I don't know how to be anything other than scared right now. Then be scared. But keep working. Keep moving forward. Keep building something. Fear doesn't have to stop you. You've already proven that. Malcolm swung up into the saddle. I'll be back before you know it. Mara and Finn came running from the house, their faces anxious. Malcolm had noticed how they watched him, how they'd started to trust him the same way they trusted their mother. Leaving them felt harder than he'd expected. You're going away? Finn asked, his voice small. Just for a little while, partner. I've got to go to the big city and take care of some important business. Malcolm leaned down from the saddle. But I'll be back. I promise. You promise? Mara's dark eyes were serious, testing him. I promise. Cross my heart. Malcolm made the gesture and saw Mara relax slightly. You take care of your mama and your brother while I'm gone, okay? Help Miss Sarah with the work. I will. Mara stepped closer. Thank you for everything. Malcolm felt something catch in his chest. You're welcome, little miss. Now go on, get back to work. Your mama's going to need you. He rode out before the emotion could overwhelm him, before he could second-guess what he was doing. But as he followed the trail toward Prescott, Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving something important behind, something that had become precious without him quite noticing when. The ride to Prescott was hard and lonely. Malcolm pushed Rust as much as he dared, camping rough at night, eating jerky and hardtack, keeping his eyes on the horizon for any sign of Pritchard's men. But the desert stayed empty, and he reached Prescott 6 days after leaving the homestead. The territorial courthouse was a solid building of adobe and timber, impressive by frontier standards. Malcolm tied Rust outside and went in, his boots loud on the wooden floors, his presence drawing stares from clerks and lawyers who probably didn't see many dusty cowboys filing legal papers. The clerk who finally helped him was a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He listened to Malcolm's story with growing interest, making notes in careful script. So you're saying these children were stolen from their mother and sold to this man Pritchard? That's exactly what I'm saying, and I need papers filed that prove Mrs. Calder is their legal mother and anyone trying to take them is committing a crime. The clerk frowned. Do you have proof? Birth certificates, baptismal records, anything official? Malcolm's heart sank. He hadn't thought about documentation. No, but the children know their mother, they call her Mama, and any fool can see they belong together. I understand, but the law requires documentation. Without it, Pritchard could claim he acquired them legally, that Mrs. Calder is the one trying to steal them. The clerk set down his pen. I'm sorry, but there's not much I can do without proof. Malcolm felt frustration rising but forced it down. Getting angry wouldn't help. What if we had witnesses? People who knew Mrs. Calder and her children before they were taken? That would help. Sworn testimony from at least 2 reliable witnesses establishing that she's the mother and the children were with her before the alleged theft. The clerk pulled out a different form. If you can get that, bring it back to me. I'll file the papers myself. Malcolm left the courthouse feeling defeated but not broken. He knew someone who could help. He just had to ride back to Tucson first, and that added another week to his timeline. But he'd promised Lena he'd finish this, and Malcolm Rourke kept his promises. The ride to Tucson took 3 days. Malcolm arrived exhausted and hungry, but he went straight to the boarding house where Lena had worked, where her children had been taken. The place looked exactly as Lena had described it, respectable on the outside, rotten underneath. Mrs. Harriet Bledstone answered the door herself, a plump woman with cold eyes and a practiced smile. May I help you? I'm looking for information about a woman who worked here a few months back. Lena Calder. She had 2 children with her. The smile disappeared. I don't know anyone by that name. Yes, you do. You sold her children to Josiah Pritchard. Malcolm's voice was quiet, but carried an edge that made Mrs. Bledstone take a step back. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need you to answer some questions. I don't have to tell you anything. No, you don't. But I can also go to the sheriff and tell him what I know about your business practices, about how you sell children who aren't yours to sell, about how you're breaking federal law. Malcolm let that sink in. Or you can answer my questions and I'll leave you alone. Your choice. Mrs. Bledstone's face went pale. What do you want to know? Were Mara and Finn Calder living here with their mother? A long pause. Then, yes. And did you sell them to Josiah Pritchard? Another pause, longer. He said he'd give them good homes, said they'd learn valuable skills. That's not what I asked. Did you sell them? Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Malcolm pulled out the paper the clerk had given him. You're going to sign this. You're going to swear that those children belong to Lena Calder, that you had no legal right to give them to anyone else, and that what you did was wrong. I can't. That would make me liable. You are liable. You broke the law. You stole children from their mother. Malcolm's voice was hard now. You can sign this paper and I'll leave you alone, or you can refuse and I'll make sure every person in Tucson knows what you did. See how much business you get then. Mrs. Bledstone signed the paper with shaking hands. Malcolm spent another 2 days tracking down the woman who'd heard the children crying, the one Lena had mentioned. She was a laundress named Mary Chen, and she signed the paper without hesitation, her eyes fierce with remembered anger. I heard those babies calling for their mama, she said. I told Mrs. Bledstone it was wrong. She didn't care. I'm glad someone finally did something about it. With both signatures, Malcolm rode hard back to Prescott and presented the papers to the clerk. The man read them carefully, made notes, then looked up at Malcolm with something like respect. This should be sufficient. Give me 2 days to file everything properly, and you'll have your legal documentation. Those 2 days felt like 2 years, but Malcolm used them to rest, to eat properly, to let Rust recover from the hard writing. When the clerk finally handed him the official papers, signed and sealed by a territorial judge, Malcolm felt like he could breathe properly for the first time in weeks. The papers stated clearly that Mara and Finn Calder were the legal children of Lena Calder, that they had been illegally removed from her care, and that any attempt to take them from her would be considered kidnapping under federal law and prosecuted accordingly. It wasn't perfect protection, but it was real, legal, and official, and it meant Pritchard would have to break federal law if he wanted to take those children again. Malcolm rode out of Prescott feeling like he was carrying something more valuable than gold. 3 weeks had passed since he'd left the homestead, longer than he'd planned, and every mile that brought him closer made him push Rust a little harder. He reached Sarah's place just as the sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of orange and gold. The homestead looked different than he remembered. The fence he'd started was now complete, the garden was thriving, and there were new repairs visible on the barn and house. They'd been busy. Sarah saw him first and called toward the house. Within seconds, Lena emerged with Mara and Finn at her heels. The children had filled out in the weeks he'd been gone, their faces less hollow, their movements less fearful. And Lena looked like someone who'd remembered how to hope. She ran toward him as he dismounted, and Malcolm barely had time to set his feet before she threw her arms around him. He caught her, held her, felt her trembling against him. You came back, she whispered. You really came back. Told you I would. Malcolm held her for another moment, then gently set her back. And I brought something with me. He pulled out the legal papers and handed them to her. Lena read them slowly, her eyes growing wider with each line, tears spilling down her cheeks. This means they're legally mine? No one can take them? No one can take them. It's official, signed by a territorial judge. Pritchard tries anything now. He's breaking federal law. Malcolm watched her face, saw the moment hope became certainty, became overwhelming relief. You're safe, Lena. All of you. She broke down then, sobbing so hard she couldn't stand. Malcolm caught her again, held her while she cried, while weeks of fear and desperation and terrible hope finally found release. Mara and Finn ran over, concerned, and Malcolm gathered them in too, all 4 of them standing there in the fading light, while Lena cried and laughed and held onto her children like she would never let go. Sarah watched from the porch, and Malcolm saw her nod once, satisfied. That night they celebrated with a dinner Sarah had been planning, chicken she'd been saving, vegetables from the garden, bread fresh from the oven. They ate together at the table, all five of them, and it felt like family in a way Malcolm hadn't experienced since Abraham Talbot had taken him in all those years ago. After dinner, after the children had been put to bed exhausted and happy, Malcolm and Lena sat outside under the stars. The desert night was cool and clear, and the silence between them was comfortable. "I don't know how to thank you," Lena said finally, "for everything you've done, for giving me back my children, for giving us a future. You don't need to thank me. Seeing you safe, seeing those kids happy, that's thanks enough." Malcolm was quiet for a moment. "Sarah says you've been working hard while I was gone. Says you're good with the land. She's been teaching me, teaching all of us, how to grow things, how to care for animals, how to make something from nothing." Lena looked toward the house where her children slept. "She's offered to let us stay permanently as partners in the homestead, says she needs help and we need a home." "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it, that I needed to talk to you first." Lena turned to look at him. "Malcolm, you've done so much for us already. You don't owe us anything else. If you need to go back to your freight business, to your old life, I understand." Malcolm had been thinking about this for 3 weeks, during every mile of hard riding, during every lonely night under the stars. He'd been thinking about what he wanted, what mattered, what kind of man he wanted to be. "I've been hauling freight for 15 years, he said slowly, moving from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to matter. It was simple, uncomplicated, safe. He looked at Lena, saw her watching him with those dark eyes that had seen too much and still held hope. But simple isn't the same as good, and safe isn't the same as living. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Sarah's right. She needs help and you need a home, but you're not the only ones." Malcolm took a breath, made the choice. "I'm saying I'd like to stay too, if you'll have me. Help work this land, help build something permanent, help raise those kids to be strong and free and safe." Lena's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different. These were joy. "You want to stay? Here? With us?" "Yeah, I do." Malcolm reached out and took her hand, the gesture familiar now, essential. "If that's what you want too." "It's what I want. It's what I've wanted since—" She stopped, smiled through her tears. "Since you told me your last name and made me believe in second chances." "Rourke," Malcolm said softly. "Malcolm Rourke. And I'm asking if you'd consider making that your last name too, yours and the children's, making us a family in every way that matters." Lena stared at him, her mouth opening in surprise. Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but Lena—" Malcolm gripped her hand tighter. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're strong and brave and fierce, and those children are incredible, and I want to spend whatever time I've got left making sure you're all safe and happy and loved. If you'll let me?" "Yes," Lena said, and then louder. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. We'll marry you. We'll be a family." Malcolm pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and careful and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling like fools. "You forgot one thing," Lena said, echoing his words from that first night in the desert. "What's that?" "To ask the kids." Ye said Sento. They asked the next morning at breakfast, Malcolm nervous in a way he hadn't been nervous facing down armed men. But Mara and Finn looked at each other, then at their mother, then at Malcolm. "Will you keep Mama safe?" Mara asked seriously. "Always. I promise." "And will you keep us safe too?" Finn added. "With everything I've got." Mara studied him for another moment, then nodded. "Okay, you can marry Mama, but we get to be in the wedding." "Wouldn't have it any other way, little miss." Sarah performed the ceremony herself 3 weeks later, standing under the cottonwood tree near the creek with a dusty Bible she'd kept from her own wedding day. Dutch rode out from Cedar Springs to witness it, bringing supplies and his blessing. Lena wore a dress Sarah had altered for her, simple but beautiful. Mara and Finn stood beside their mother wearing clean clothes Sarah had made from fabric Dutch brought. And Malcolm wore his best shirt, the one he saved for town, feeling more nervous than he'd ever felt facing danger. But when Lena took his hand and smiled at him, all the nervousness disappeared. "Dearly beloved," Sarah began, her voice carrying over the sound of the creek and the wind through the trees, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in matrimony. They've been through hell to get here, fought for each other and these children, and earned the right to call themselves family." It wasn't the traditional ceremony, but it was perfect. Sarah spoke about love earned through hardship, about family forged from mercy and determination, about second chances and new beginnings. And when she finally said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Malcolm kissed Lena with Mara and Finn cheering and Dutch wiping his eyes and the whole valley watching. They built a life together over the months that followed, the five of them working Sarah's land and making it thrive. Malcolm repaired buildings and mended fences and learned to coax crops from stubborn soil. Lena worked the garden and raised chickens and taught the children to read from the Bible Sarah lent them. Mara and Finn grew stronger, healthier, their nightmares coming less frequently, their laughter coming more easily. They learned to ride horses and tend animals and do honest work that made them proud. And they learned that home wasn't a place you were born to. It was a place you built with people who loved you. A year after the wedding, Malcolm and Lena stood in the same spot under the cottonwood tree, watching Mara teach Finn how to skip stones across the creek. "You ever think about that night in the desert?" Lena asked, her hand finding Malcolm's automatically. "When I tried to rob you. Sometimes, I think about how desperate you were, how brave, how you were willing to do anything to find your children. I think about what you said, about forgetting your last name." Lena leaned against him. "I'm glad I didn't forget it. I'm glad Malcolm Rourke means something. It means family now, means home, means exactly where I'm supposed to be." Malcolm wrapped his arm around her, watched his children, because they were his now in every way that mattered, laughing by the creek. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We built this. Not with money or luck or anything handed to us. We built it with our hands and our hearts and our refusal to give up." Malcolm kissed the top of her head. "And no one can ever take it away." Lena smiled, that same fierce smile she'd worn when she'd pointed a gun at him in the desert, when she'd refused to stop looking for her children, when she'd chosen to build a life instead of just surviving one. "No," she agreed. "No one can ever take it away." They stood there as the sun set over their land, over their home, over the future they'd fought for and won. The desert that had almost killed them, that had tested them and pushed them to their limits, now surrounded them with beauty, red cliffs glowing in the fading light, stars beginning to emerge, and the constant whisper of wind through the cottonwood leaves. Malcolm Rourke had spent his whole life moving, never staying, never letting anyone matter too much. And then a desperate woman had tried to rob him, and he'd made the best decision of his life. He'd let her, and then he'd helped her, and then he'd loved her. Sometimes the best things in life came from the moments when you chose mercy over anger, hope over fear, and love over the safety of staying alone. Mara called out from the creek, "Mama! Malcolm! Watch this!" and sent a stone skipping across the water 7 times before it sank. "That's incredible, sweetheart," Lena called back, pride evident in every word. Malcolm just smiled, his heart full in a way he'd never imagined possible, and realized that somewhere along the way, between the desert and the homestead, between desperation and hope, between strangers and family, he'd finally found the one thing he'd been searching for his whole life without knowing it. Home. Not a place on a map, but a feeling. The feeling of belonging, of mattering, of being exactly where you were meant to be with exactly the people you were meant to be with. The desert wind carried the sound of children's laughter, and Malcolm closed his eyes and breathed it in. This life they'd built from nothing, this family they'd forged from mercy and grit and love that refused to let go. And under the cottonwood tree where they'd been married, where they'd promised to love and protect each other for all the days they had left, Malcolm Rourke finally understood what Abraham Talbot had been trying to teach him all those years ago. Your name should mean something, and his did. It meant father, husband, protector, home. It meant Malcolm Rourke, the man who'd caught a falling woman and refused to let her go, who'd helped her find her stolen children, who'd built a family from the ashes of desperation and turned it into something beautiful. The story that had started with a gun pointed at his chest in the Arizona desert had become the story of his life, the story he'd tell their grandchildren someday, the story of how love could rise from the hardest circumstances and build something that would last forever. As darkness fell and stars filled the sky like promises, Malcolm took Lena's hand and walked back to their home, their children running ahead, and he knew with absolute certainty that every hard mile, every difficult choice, every moment of fear and pain had been worth it, because they'd led him here, to this moment, to this family, to this life earned, not given, built brick by brick, mile by mile, heartbeat by heartbeat. And that was everything.